She signed her firing papers while hiding his baby. Clara Bellini sat across from the most feared Mafia boss in Milan, her hand pressed against her stomach, knowing Lorenzo Marchetti had just thrown away not only the woman who loved him, but the child he never knew existed. 6 years later, that same ruthless boss would find a little boy with his exact steel gray eyes and realize the biggest betrayal of his life was the one he committed himself. Welcome to the midnight hour. You and I are going to unpack this tragedy together. Picture the scene. Clara sits frozen in a mahogany chair, gripping a silver pen so tight, her knuckles are completely white. On Lorenzo's desk rests a single piece of paper. Feeling like a death warrant ready to erase 2 years of her life, she refuses to lift her head, knowing one look into his freezing gray eyes will shatter her disguise. But the real story hides out of sight, beneath the desk. Her hand presses desperately against her stomach. She is leaving with a secret that will drag this untouchable boss through 6 long years of pure agony. It teaches us a very real truth. The deepest secrets we bear just to survive are usually the exact blades that eventually tear us completely apart. Let me paint the backdrop for you. Imagine the rocky cliffs of Milan, where a massive stone fortress casts a dark shadow over the city below. Inside those walls paces Lorenzo. He is 36 years old, but he moves like a restless ghost trapped inside an insanely expensive suit. He buried his father at 22 and inherited a crime empire practically drowning in blood for 14 straight years. This man has ripped every ounce of warmth from his soul, convinced his heart is safely locked inside a steel vault. The harsh lighting of his office perfectly matches the deadness in his chest, but he missed the massive irony of his existence. Believing you are absolutely untouchable, by love is the fastest way to guarantee it brings you straight to your knees when it finally strikes. For 3 months, Clara exists merely as a shadow in the background. She is a ghost in the heavy hallways, quietly filing papers with her hair tied back, staring at the floor whenever Lorenzo passes. But everything changes the moment the fear washes out of her face. A soldier messed up a vital shipment, and behind those massive oak doors, Lorenzo is delivering a ruthless beating. Clara is sitting right there. She hears the awful hits and the desperate gasps for air, but she stays completely planted in her chair. Anyone else would be sprinting for the exit. Her quiet refusal to run teaches us something profound. True courage is not always about throwing punches or screaming back. Sometimes it is simply planting your feet and holding your ground when the rest of the world tells you to flee. Anyone else listening to that violence would have vanished, but Clara simply waits. When Lorenzo walks out, his knuckles are coated in fresh blood. Clara is deathly pale, her hands trembling uncontrollably, yet she just holds the folder out to him. Not a single tear falls. She tilts her head up, locks her gaze with this terrifying boss, and completely short-circuits his mind. She does not look at him like he is a monster. Her soft eyes cut right past the brutal ink, aiming straight for the lonely, damaged kid trapped inside. He signs the paper in a thick, suffocating silence. From that exact second, his cold heart is captured. It proves a beautiful truth about human nature. Even the most terrifying people are secretly starving for someone to finally see who they truly are behind the mask. Look closely at how this man builds his armor. Lorenzo is shaped like a human weapon, wearing these immaculate, expensive black suits that project pure authority. Every single detail is controlled to absolute perfection. He is the walking definition of power. A man whose freezing gray eyes can bring grown men to tears. Then there is the ink. A massive dark cross and a crowned snake crawl up his neck, left intentionally visible beneath an open collar. He desperately wants the world to know how dangerous he is. But underneath that tough exterior, he is bluffing. It reveals a tragic pattern in human behavior. The harder a person tries to make their outside shell look completely bulletproof, the more obvious it becomes that they are absolutely terrified of falling apart on the inside. His inked arms tell a tragic story of a life he cannot escape. He is covered in dark memories, from weeping angels to a broken clock frozen on a time he refuses to mention. The word honor is stamped across his scarred knuckles. The room goes still when he catches Clara staring at those very hands. She does not flinch or show an ounce of disgust. Instead, her eyes soften with genuine heartbreak for his damaged soul. That one tender look completely shatters his ruthless persona. The terrifying leader actually loses his balance. As she reaches for her coat, his voice cracks as he tells her to stay. He tries to frame it as a strict command, but it sounds like a drowning man begging for a lifeline. It reminds us that one tiny drop of pure empathy can wash away decades of toxic armor. Let's pause and look at this shift together. Clara freezes by the heavy door, the desk lamp catching a warm spark in her eyes. Lorenzo panics, spinning wild excuses to keep her from leaving. He rambles about urgent ledgers and orders her to sit down to take notes. It is a desperately thin lie. His cold office has started feeling like a graveyard, and the soft rhythm of her breathing is the only thing tethering him to sanity. She quietly takes her seat. The clock ticks far past midnight. Lorenzo ignores his paperwork entirely. Instead, he watches the gentle way she writes, the tiny frown on her lips, and how she tucks a stray hair behind her ear. We often think we are total control, until we realize we have been hijacked by the quiet, simple details of another human being. The heavy silence shatters when he blurts out that she is not afraid of him. Clara stops writing. Remaining calm, she asks if she is supposed to be. Then she delivers a devastating truth. She tells him he wields fear like a heavy iron shield because the alternative is too painful. When he dares her to guess what that is, she looks deep into his cold eyes and whispers that it would mean letting people see his bleeding heart. In that exact second, the untouchable boss breaks. He should have fired her on the spot. Instead, he slowly turns around and stares out the dark window. It reveals a profound reality about connection. The rare souls who can see straight through our thickest armor are exactly who we need the most. But they also hold the terrifying power to utterly destroy us. Facing the dark glass, his voice drops to a hollow whisper, ordering her to leave. He listens to the rustle of her coat and the slow click of her heels, but at the threshold she stops. He stays entirely frozen, refusing to turn around. Gently, she whispers that whatever trauma he is dragging through the dark, he no longer has to carry it alone. The heavy door clicks shut. Lorenzo is left standing in the quiet, feeling his frozen heart cracking wide open. Over the next 90 days, a beautiful transformation unfolds. His terrifying armor melts away, replaced by late nights spent spilling his darkest secrets into the safety of her presence. It proves that no matter how deep you bury your painful past, genuine kindness will always find a tiny crack and shatter your highest walls. You might be wondering how she handles this darkness. Clara quietly absorbs every horrifying detail of his past. She learns his mother died giving birth, leaving his ruthless father to raise him with sheer violence. He confesses to taking his first life at 17, an act that hollowed out his soul. Yet Clara stays right there. She never acts like a righteous savior. One night, sitting dangerously close, she softly tells him he is not a monster. He is just a frightened kid who was never allowed to be human. Lorenzo stares at her wrist, hypnotized by the steady pulse beating beneath her skin. It is a powerful reality check. Sometimes the most shattered people do not need you to fix them. They just need someone to sit in the dark and witness their pain without throwing judgment. We have all seen this dangerous romance play out, but the script flips here. Instead of pushing her away, Lorenzo pulls her deeper into his chaotic underworld. They become shadows, stealing breathless moments whenever his crew looks away. Clara clearly sees the blood staining his cuffs, but she also sees a broken king who practically worships her. Soon, the atmosphere sours. They start making sloppy mistakes. Lorenzo buried his abusive father 14 years ago, yet that cruel ghost still haunts his mind. Whenever he lets himself be gentle with Clara, his father's voice screams that love is a fatal weakness. It leaves us with a painful truth. The toxic people who broke us will continue to control our future, until we finally find the courage to silence their ghosts for good. We flash back to his 16th birthday. His brutal father forces a knife into his trembling hands, delivering a twisted lesson. He claims love is a rusted chain tying you to weak people. If they bleed, you break. Real leaders do not shatter, they do the shattering. Lorenzo internalized that venom, building a criminal empire out of solid ice, but now, Clara is dismantling that fortress with a simple smile. The terrifying boss is unraveling. He walks out of mob meetings just to be near her. He even lets traitors walk away breathing, terrified she might smell fresh blood on his clothes. It is the ultimate irony of a guarded heart. When you spend your life playing the heartless monster, letting in just one drop of genuine love feels exactly like watching your universe explode. Picture this. It is 3 a.m, the city is asleep, but you and I are standing in the shadows of a dimly lit mahogany study. We are watching a brutal tragedy unfold. Marco, the old head of security, stands in the doorway. He watched Lorenzo grow from a crying kid in the gutter into an absolute human weapon. But tonight Marco sees the blade dulling. He drops the bomb. Clara is a fatal liability. Lorenzo tenses, warning the old hitman to back off, but Marco does not flinch. Rivals smell blood. Lorenzo is losing his edge. It is an ancient lesson. When you sit on a throne built of bones, enemies will always find your soft spot. We build massive walls to keep others out, only to realize we just locked ourselves inside. Look closely at Lorenzo. This man is the undisputed king of the underworld, a phantom who ends lives just to make a point. Yet in this suffocating silence, he is merely a broken man staring blindly at his desk. His fountain pen bleeds dark ink onto expensive paper, because Marco struck his one raw nerve. The street soldiers are whispering. They say the boss went soft over a woman in his brutal world. A rumor like that is a signed death warrant. Lorenzo slowly raises his steel gray eyes, trying to project pure ice, but a tiny agonizing hesitation betrays him. The cruel irony of power is that the higher you build your fortress, the more terrified you become of the fall. No amount of dirty money can protect a person from the vulnerability of their own beating heart. Lorenzo barks a hollow threat, but a toxic seed of doubt is already taking root in his mind. We slip away from the heavy tension of that office, gliding through the silent mansion to find Clara. She is locked inside the cold marble bathroom, shaking as she stares at a positive pregnancy test. Her hands tremble, exactly like they did the night she heard a rival begging for mercy outside Lorenzo's door. She holds fragile proof of new life. Yet the room feels suffocated by looming violence. She presses a cold palm against her stomach, utterly terrified of the tiny heartbeat inside her. In their fractured underworld, love offers no salvation. It just paints a glaring neon target on your back. We simply cannot force beautiful things to grow in deeply poisoned soil. Watch her desperate logic unfold right here, because this is where the human heart plays its cruelest tricks. Clara actually convinces herself that a baby could fix this fractured, violent man. She knows his absolute rule. Anything you love becomes a heavy iron chain around your neck, and a child is the ultimate liability. Yet she stares into the mirror, praying this miracle will shatter his fortress of ice. It breaks you to watch it. We have all been there. Believing our pure devotion is strong enough to rewrite someone's dark nature, but she is gambling her unborn baby's life on a dangerous fantasy. The harsh truth of this world is that you can never save a drowning man by handing him another heavy thing to hold. True rescue always has to start from within. The pacing of this next moment is an act of sheer cosmic cruelty. Clara makes the painfully naive choice to tell him the truth. She chooses hope. But the universe holds zero reverence for hope. At the exact second she turns that doorknob, Lorenzo's massive syndicate deal violently collapses. 8 months of negotiations evaporate into thin air. An informant just handed critical names to the rival Ferraro family. It is a precise inside job, requiring unrestricted access to his private study. Life has a sad habit of unleashing its darkest storms the moment you dare to look for the sun. Clara walks down the hallway, stepping blindly into a room rigged with emotional explosives. It is a harsh reminder of how terrible timing can turn a pure intention into a lifelong scar. Every footstep echoes in the heavy air as Clara enters the office. The atmosphere is instantly suffocating. 2 massive enforcers block the heavy mahogany doors behind her. Lorenzo sits rigid in his chair, looking less like a man and more like a stone gargoyle carved from pure grief. Then the accusation drops like a guillotine. He genuinely believes she is the rat. He thinks every soft whisper in bed was just a calculated move to copy his ledgers. Clara pleads with the man she loves to truly see her. But when a traumatized soul feels cornered, they weaponize their paranoia against your devotion. Fear screams, love whispers, and Lorenzo only listens to the screams. People so often project their unhealed demons onto the ones who love them the most. This moment will absolutely gut you. She leans across the desk, swearing someone planted those documents. The muscles in Lorenzo's jaw twitch. He stares at this woman, the singular source of light in his wretched existence, and spits out the word us, like it burns his tongue. There is no us, he snarls. There is only his bleeding empire and the traitor who held the knife. He is slaughtering his own salvation, because it feels safer to be betrayed than to admit he is vulnerable. But pay close attention to Clara right now. She does not collapse. She swallows her tears, squares her shoulders, and refuses to shatter. The most profound act of self-love is often simply walking away from someone else's chaos with your dignity entirely intact. She attempts one final, desperate plea. She searches his cold eyes, hunting for the vulnerable man who whispered his deep fears to her at midnight. But he is gone, locked away inside a fortress of frost. Then comes the cruelest twist of all. Marco, the actual architect of this misery, steps out of the shadows. Lorenzo coldly instructs him to draw up dismissal papers. The sheer absurdity of it is deafening. Here is a ruthless mafia don, severing his soulmate using sterile corporate paperwork and a blood money check. It is his cowardly method of sparing her life while legally erasing her existence. But you simply cannot buy absolution. It reminds us that no amount of wealth or hush money will ever bandage the deep wounds of a shattered heart. Let us sit in that heavy leather chair with her for a second. She is in the exact spot where they first surrendered to love, her palm pressing secretly against her abdomen. She holds the one truth that could halt this madness. But she knows the monster sitting across from her. If she confesses the pregnancy now, Lorenzo's poisoned mind will view their innocent child as a strategic hostage. He would see it as a desperate extortion play, so Clara silently swallows the words. She chooses to become the treacherous villain in his narrative, purely so she can be the fierce protector in her own. The heaviest chains we drag through in this life are the painful truths we conceal to keep our loved ones safe. She sacrifices her world to protect his. The tension peaks as the pen trembles in Clara's hand. Marco towers over her, an imposing symbol of lethal, unspoken threat. She knows that if she lifts her chin or locks eyes with Lorenzo for even a second, her emotional dam will completely shatter. She will scream the absolute truth. But she knows exactly how this brutal family disposes of its liabilities. She refuses to let her unborn child become collateral damage in a paranoid turf war. So she presses the gold nib to the paper. She signs her name, legally anchoring herself to a lifetime of silence. She is trading her soulmate for her son's right to breathe. The most profound sacrifices are rarely loud, heroic battles. They are the agonizing, quiet choices we make in the shadows. Clara walks out of those heavy doors without a single glance backward, and right there, bathed in the dim light of his decaying empire, Lorenzo watches his actual salvation slip away. This tragic fool will not uncover the magnitude of his mistake for 6 agonizing years. We follow Clara as she disappears into the cold wind, from Milan to Florence, eventually washing ashore in a sleepy coastal town untouched by the Mafia. She takes a mundane job crunching numbers. No silencers in the dark. No brutal enforcers, just pure safety. You and I both know the deep irony here. We passionately chase the fire of danger in our youth, only to realize true peace is found when we stop running toward destructive flames and learn to appreciate the quiet. As the seasons change, Clara undergoes a quiet metamorphosis. That suffocating passion she harbored for Lorenzo does not simply evaporate into the night sky. Intense energy is never destroyed. It merely changes shape. It hardens into a fierce, unbreakable maternal instinct. She strictly forbids herself from mourning the man who discarded her. But fate possesses a dark, twisting sense of humor. The climax hits when her baby boy takes his very first breath in this world. Clara looks down, and staring back at her are Lorenzo's unmistakable, piercing steel-gray eyes. You can sprint to the absolute edge of the earth to outrun your history, but eventually, we all must find the courage to face our past, even when it looks back at us through innocent eyes. Let us sit in the dark for a moment and unpack this together. The room is suffocatingly quiet. Clara is curled up, clutching her newborn so tight, you would think the shadows might steal him. She makes a whispered vow. This boy will never touch the blood-stained empire of his father. Then she makes a choice that breaks my heart. She names him Marco, a sweet name to a stranger, but you and I know the cruel irony. Marco was the very hitman who erased her from Lorenzo's life. Every time she calls her son for dinner, her heart breaks all over again. It is an agonizing reminder of the price of loving a monster sometimes. The scars we refuse to hide are the only things keeping us from walking right back into the fire. The screen fades to black, and 6 long years of running simply wash away. The cold kitchen light catches a woman entirely transformed. Clara is 30 now. That terrified girl weeping on a syndicate floor is gone, replaced by a mother built of sheer stone. Heartbreak does not just tear you apart, it rewrites your soul. It teaches us a hard truth. Our deepest wounds eventually harden into our strongest armor. Her 5-year-old boy is walking proof she survived. But there is a heavy shadow looming over this quiet life. Little Marco is a chilling, perfect reflection of Lorenzo. He carries that exact same dark glare, that terrifying heavy silence. He scans every room the very second he steps inside. You can hide a young wolf in a quiet village all you want, but wild blood always remembers how to hunt. The tension in this kitchen is thick enough to choke on. Clara is rolling out dough when the absolute worst question finally falls from her son's lips. Little Marco stands by the counter, asking the one thing she has spent 5 long years dodging. Why is his father not here? The boy is far too sharp to ignore the gaping hole in their lives. Clara forces a fragile smile. feeding him a rehearsed line about how families come in all shapes. She refuses to meet his eyes, but Marco sees right through the act. He presses harder, asking if he ever even had a father at all. Her hands are trembling violently. We try so desperately to shield our children from the toxic mistakes of our past. But you cannot protect them from the crushing emptiness left behind. The truth is finally coming for them. Let us freeze the frame right here. You and I have watched tragedies play out before, but the emotional damage here cuts so much deeper. Clara is paralyzed by a terrifying vision, this ruthless mob boss using his own flesh and blood as a pawn in a brutal war. She drops to her knees, swearing her love will fill the void of 100 fathers, but Marco just stares right through her. The light catches his storm-gray eyes, and they belong entirely to the man who ruined her life. Clara tells herself she will wait until he is older to tell the truth. But we all know that is a comforting lie. Running from our darkest demons only gives them more room to grow teeth. Because miles away in Milan, 6 years of pure, unchecked rage have turned Lorenzo into a living nightmare. Watch the scene shift back to the massive, suffocating estates of Milan. You might think that casting out the woman who supposedly betrayed him would give Lorenzo some twisted sense of peace. Instead, it shoved him straight off the ledge. He never possessed a single shred of proof that Clara was the rat. She was entirely innocent. A man consumed by unhealed grief will gladly set the whole world on fire, just to feel a fleeting second of warmth. Lorenzo drowned his agonizing emotional damage in pure, unadulterated violence, warping into a boss his own people no longer recognize. His top enforcers wake up in cold sweats at the mere mention of his name. He has dragged his brutal empire across 3 different countries, crowning himself a cold-blooded king who never hands out mercy. Notice how the creeping shadows completely swallow the room as the sun sets over his estate. The most feared boss in Europe sits totally alone in his hollow mansion, and the deafening silence is eating his mind alive. He played by the rigid rules of the underworld, cutting out the traitor to protect his throne. He did everything by the book. So why does he feel like he is bleeding out on his own marble floor? True regret always shows up to collect its debt. No matter how much power you hold, he despises what he has become. Clara haunts his every waking moment in the quiet of the night. She is no traitor. She was the only soul brave enough to look past his violent exterior and hold his scarred hands. He took the one pure, beautiful thing in his life and threw it to the wolves. Stick with me here because fate is about to deliver a truly agonizing gut punch. It takes 3 long years for Lorenzo's raging paranoia to finally demand a proper investigation. When the results cross his desk, they hit him like a freight train. The real informant was a low-level foot soldier named Dante, who sold out the family and perfectly framed Clara. She was completely innocent the entire time. The truth acts as a brutal mirror, forcing us to look at the wretched monsters we have become. Lorenzo unleashes days of feral, unchecked fury upon Dante, but it does nothing to fill the gaping hole in his chest. As he washes the fresh blood from his trembling hands, the frantic hunt to find the woman he so recklessly threw away officially begins. The tragedy of it all is almost too heavy to carry. He is years too late to undo his fatal mistake. Clara pulled off a flawless vanishing act. We watch a desperate montage of total dead ends, no forwarding address, no work history. Not a single digital footprint for his crew to track down. She became a literal ghost the moment he cast her into the cold. Being entirely powerless for the first time in his life is driving him to the edge of sanity. He throws millions at the very best trackers. But he is only chasing phantoms. All the worldly power you accumulate means nothing when you have already bankrupted your soul. The untouchable king is rotting away in his castle, realizing he destroyed his only shot at peace. Karma is a patient hunter, and it never forgets a debt. Watch how the hands of fate slowly tighten the noose. Exactly 6 years after he shattered her life, Lorenzo is sitting in his freezing office. Out of nowhere, his encrypted phone lights up. A brief text delivers 4 world-altering words. Liguria, Rio Maggiore, the Bellini woman, and the most agonizing revelation of all, a child. Just watch his face as the air is sucked from the room. His cold, dead heart literally stops beating in his chest. A child. Time is the one merciless judge that eventually forces us to answer for our most deeply buried sins. He abandons his criminal empire on the spot, tearing out of the city in the dead of night. For 3 grueling hours on the highway, his hands grip the wheel, terrified of what that single word means for his broken existence. The lens pushes in on his face, capturing the chaotic storm behind his eyes. He is bargaining with himself. What if the boy is older? What if Clara simply found peace with a local man? He is grasping at straws to protect his sanity, but the heavy, sickening dread in his gut already knows the truth. Intuition is often just the soul accepting what the brain is far too terrified to admit. He finally reaches Ryomagori, a breathtaking village clinging to the seaside cliffs. The winding streets force the untouchable king to leave his armored car and walk among ordinary people. He steps into a small, fragrant bakery. The older woman behind the counter takes one look at his lethal presence, and her face drains of color. It is that bone-deep panic of recognizing the devil at your door. You and I can feel the tension radiating off the screen. Lorenzo is a glaring anomaly in this peaceful town. His tailored suit and the dark ink crawling up his neck scream of violence. He whispers Clara's name, and the baker instantly hardens, warning him that his kind has no place here. The shadows cut across his face as he leans over the counter. His cold eyes meet hers, vibrating with a raw, haunting panic. Total desperation will always strip away our titles, leaving only the bleeding, broken human underneath. He swears on his meaningless life that he brings no harm. He just needs to see the woman upstairs. This brave stranger looks at the deadliest boss in the country, and all she sees is a shattered ghost of a man, desperately drowning in an ocean of his own regret. The baker finally surrenders the address, but she makes sure to twist the knife first. She looks this monster dead in the eye, and tells him he should be utterly ashamed of whatever he did to that poor girl. Lorenzo absorbs the crushing blow in complete silence. Owning up to our own guilt is the heaviest weight any of us will ever carry. He stumbles back into the fading sunlight, walking like a condemned man marching toward the gallows. He finds the quiet apartment building, draped in soft vines and blooming flowers. But suddenly his boots stop. He freezes dead in his tracks at the edge of the small yard, right there. Bathed in the golden afternoon sun is a little dark-haired boy playing in the dirt. The entire universe seems to hold its breath. Nothing will ever be the same again. Let us turn the lights down low for this one. The world shrinks until a crushing weight rests right on our chests. A little boy squats in the dust, turning over a pale rock. Lorenzo, a man who built a Mafia empire on pure ruthlessness, suddenly forgets how to pull air into his lungs. The kid looks up and Lorenzo stares straight into stormy gray eyes. It is a chilling mirror of his own ruined soul. The ocean roar and village noise simply melt away. Right now, only two souls exist, the blood-stained kingpin, and this tiny phantom wearing his exact face. It reminds us of a quiet truth, no matter how fast you run. You can never outpace the echoes of your own blood. The boy tilts his head, delivering the exact cold stare Lorenzo has practiced in the dark 1,000,000 times. With innocent wonder, the boy looks up at this terrifying dawn and asks who he is, the feared commander. A man who orders hits over his morning coffee, cannot force a single word past his paralyzed throat. Frantic footsteps suddenly shatter the quiet spell. Clara screams for her baby, her voice heavy with panic. The sound dies in her throat the second she rounds the corner. She has played out this tragedy in her mind for 6 agonizing years. It goes to show that the nightmares we brace for are nothing compared to the ghosts that finally breach our safe havens. She freezes. Lorenzo stands there like a hollowed-out shell, the color drained from his skin. The moment hangs in the heavy air just as little Marco raises his hand, pointing straight at the shattered crime lord. Tonight, you and I are going to unpack this beautiful tragedy together. We watch little Marco tugging his mother's dress, asking about the shadow in their quiet courtyard. Clara reacts on pure maternal instinct. Her fingers grip his shoulder, her tone dropping into a razor-thin register of primal fear. It is the raw sound of survival, the exact shield that kept them breathing for half a decade. Marco reads the terror in her eyes and sprints inside. The heavy door clicks shut with the finality of a vault. Now they are completely alone. Clara turns to face the phantom who shattered her soul, yet accidentally gave her the only thing she truly loves. Lorenzo is frozen. He drags his heavy gaze from the door back to her face, finally stripped of his ruthless mob boss mask. There is no malice left in his eyes. We only witness the suffocating horror of a man realizing he missed 6 irreplaceable years of his own flesh and blood. He tries to speak, but the words turn to ash. Clara lifts her chin and straightens her spine, painting a fierce portrait of defiance to hide her shaking hands. She fires her words like silver bullets. His name is Marco, he just turned 5, and yes, he inherited those exact piercing gray eyes. Then comes the fatal blow. She states the boy has no father, because the man who made him tossed them out like garbage before Marco took his first breath. Lorenzo staggers backward. It teaches us a bitter lesson. Deep guilt always hits way harder than any physical weapon ever could. His underworld armor shatters onto the cobblestones. The midnight tension is thick enough to choke on. Lorenzo shifts, trying to play the victim. His voice cracks, whispering she never gave him a chance to be a father. Clara erupts. Her raw fury is a masterpiece of pain, throwing reality right back in his face. He dragged her name through the dirt, branded her a traitor, and exiled her before she could speak. She steps up to the most dangerous man alive and demands the brutal truth. Would his paranoid mind have ever believed the boy was his? Or would he have seen an innocent child as another rival scheme? Lorenzo's jaw turns to solid stone. This silence teaches us a simple lesson. The harsh truth needs no defense. He has zero answers, because her tragic assessment is completely flawless. Stick with me, because this is where the story digs into your heart. This is the moment tragedy locks their fate. Clara holds his gaze, her voice dropping to a whisper. She tells him she simply did what was necessary. She became a fortress to protect their boy from his criminal empire, and from the man himself. When the test arrived, Lorenzo chose his bloody throne over her devotion. He let paranoia blindfold his heart. It is a quiet truth of life that we want our past mistakes to wash away, but the universe always collects its toll. Lorenzo finally whispers an admission of guilt. The words hit the stones like lead weights. Clara stands perfectly still. She knows his confession is genuine, but an apology today can never stitch up the bleeding wounds of those empty yesterdays. Clara unleashes her buried agony, every word cutting the air like shattered glass. She warns him that a sudden conscience does not erase 6 brutal years of scraping by in the shadows. It does not hand their boy the father he deserved. Lorenzo's desperate eyes drift to the window. Marco presses his hands against the glass, watching the storm outside. Lorenzo's voice breaks as he begs to know his son. Clara cuts him off, stepping into his line of sight to block the boy from his violent world. You cannot abandon someone to the dark and then casually stroll back into the light. Being a true parent requires showing up, not just sharing blood. She built an unbreakable sanctuary for her child, completely walled off from the endless cycle of violence Lorenzo leaves in his wake. She swears to defend that peace with her last breath. Lorenzo throws his hands up, begging her to believe he would never harm his blood. Clara forces him to look at the collateral damage of his existence. His lifestyle is poison, rotting everything it touches. We focus on Lorenzo's hands, shaking uncontrollably. Clara stares at those bruised knuckles, haunted by memories of kissing them. Praying they belong to a protector rather than a butcher, it highlights a devastating reality. We often fall blindly in love with a person's potential, rather than the dark truth of who they actually are. Broken, his broad shoulders caving in. He softly asks what she wants him to do. Her answer rings out like a gunshot in the dark. Pack up, go back to Milan, leave them alone. A faint tremor betrays Clara's voice. You can see the self-loathing in her eyes for showing weakness. She reminds him that every choice breathes a consequence. Honestly, accepting that fact is often the most bitter pill we have to swallow. We see them in the quiet courtyard. They are 2 beautifully ruined people who destroyed one another, standing across an invisible canyon of grief. In that heavy silence, Lorenzo drops a match into the powder keg. He simply says no. Clara's breathing stops as she watches him regain his footing. He states he will not turn his back and play dead. She is demanding he choose his Mafia crown over his family for a second time. His jaw locks tight. He made that catastrophic mistake once, and he will burn down the world before making it again. Clara tries to remind him. He forfeited the right to choose, but his broken voice slices through her armor. He looks like a man bleeding out, confessing he deserves nothingness. He discarded her when he was meant to be her shield. He swallowed the poison of syndicate lies instead of trusting his heart. For 6 years he built a mountain of wealth that tastes like ashes. Because he slaughtered the connection that made him human, he takes a slow step forward. To her credit, Clara does not retreat an inch. He whispers he is not demanding instant absolution or claiming a family he hasn't earned. He just wants the chance to change. We must remember. True redemption is never found in a hollow apology. It is forged in the grueling labor of rebuilding the temple you burned down. You can see Clara forcing her tears down. She asks what happens if her answer remains a permanent no. Lorenzo's infamous armor completely dissolves, leaving behind a terrifying vulnerability. He promises to stay anyway. He vows to buy a quiet house at the edge of the village and exist as a ghost, waiting decades if his penance requires it. He is not abandoning his boy, and he refuses to abandon her again. That promise is the final hammer blow. Clara shatters, crying out that he does not even love her. The accusation is heavy with 6 years of rotting baggage. Lorenzo freezes. She reminds him that through all their intimate nights, those words never once crossed his lips. It proves that assuming someone's devotion without hearing the truth is a silent poison that will destroy a human heart. Her voice shakes as she recounts how flawlessly he threw her away. She accuses him of confusing territorial possession with genuine affection. When he softly asks if she truly believes him to be that empty, she fires back that he was the master who taught her that brutal lesson. Watch how the scene lingers on Lorenzo. The physical agony contorting his features is raw. His large hands hover helplessly, desperate to reach out but terrified to burn her again. Then the dam finally breaks. He tells her he loves her. The confession detonating like dynamite in the quiet garden. His voice fractures as he swears he loved her, even in their darkest days. I will leave you with this hard truth. Sometimes the people who break us are simply the ones most terrified of being broken themselves. Let us step into a room thick with ghosts tonight. Lorenzo finally sheds his ironclad mob boss armor. He confesses he was completely intoxicated by the way Clara used to look at him not as a monster, but just as a man. That tenderness terrified him so deeply, he deliberately threw her to the wolves. Clara, hollowed out, reminds him of the brutal reality. To save his own skin, he destroyed hers. Lorenzo blames the brainwashing of his ruthless father, the need to purge any weakness. Silence drops heavy, while little Marco watches through the glass like a phantom, witnessing a tragedy. You and I both know the tragic irony here. Running from the feelings that make us human often transforms us into the very monsters we swore we would never become. Clara spent 6 agonizing years starving for this exact apology, burying every fragile hope just to survive without him. But now, with the notorious Don finally bleeding out his truth, there is no romantic reunion. His words hit like a sledgehammer against the mental fortress she built to survive him. Her expression goes completely hollow, and she simply points him toward the door. She refuses to shatter her son's quiet world with a screaming match. Lorenzo is visibly sweating, desperate and begging for a timeline, but Clara just raises a hand. She has to figure out how to tell her child his phantom father only returned out of guilt. We learn a painful lesson in moments like this. A delayed apology never magically repairs the damage. It simply rips open a completely new scar. Lorenzo is falling apart at the seams. His jaw clenches, his body rigid with an agony he has never known. Clara watches him drown in the wreckage. Quietly satisfied, the untouchable king is finally suffering. Defeated, he slumps his shoulders, mutters the name of a cheap local inn, and vows he will wait until the end of time. Clara watches the apex predator fade into the sleepy town before dragging her heavy limbs inside. She dreads the inevitable fallout, but little Marco is sitting on the sofa, perfectly still. He never asks who the strange man was. He simply looks up and states he already knows that man is his father, no matter how deeply we bury our history. Innocent children always have a remarkable way of seeing straight through the dark to find the naked truth. The air in the room turns suffocating. Little Marco points toward the door, whispering that he and the stranger share the exact same dark eyes. A cold shiver runs down Clara's spine. Her son has that terrifying intuition. She scoops the boy into her arms, holding him like a lifeline. With a trembling breath, she admits the truth. Yes, that intimidating shadow is his father. When Marco asks why he was sent away, Clara chokes, offering only hollow excuses about the past. Then the boy delivers a crushing blow, softly asking if his father simply did not want him. The deepest emotional wounds never come from our enemies. They stem from the innocent questions of the ones we love, forcing us to finally face the painful history we desperately tried to leave behind. Clara's voice trembles as she promises the boy his father never knew he existed. She stares into a miniature reflection of Lorenzo's face, confessing she kept him hidden to protect him from a vicious underworld war. The heavy ghost of violence suffocates them both. Marco processes this with a quiet, tragic maturity, softly asking if the man will ever return. Clara loses her footing, panic gripping her chest. But in a profound shift, the little boy reaches out, grabs her shaking hand, and tells her she looks like a sad thunderstorm. It is a deeply humbling mirror. We spend our entire lives pretending to be made of steel to protect the ones we love, only to discover they are the ones holding the umbrella when our own skies finally fall. Marco shatters her defenses by demanding to meet the fallen king. Clara fights back tears, wondering what a child could possibly say to a ruthless mob boss. The boy's questions are heartbreaking. He wants to know why the man looks so sad, what the dark ink on his hands means, and if he likes catching bugs. Then comes the fatal strike. He wants to ask if the man feels guilty for making his mother cry. Clara breaks down sobbing, and her young son gently wipes her tears across town. Lorenzo sits paralyzed in a cheap motel, staring into the dark, discovering he has a child has completely shattered his empire of ice. You can spend decades outsmarting enemies, but you can never outrun the living, breathing consequences of the love you thought you buried. Stick with me here, because Lorenzo is spiraling into the abyss. He cannot erase the image of that boy. The child possesses his own dangerous gaze, blended with Clara's unbreakable spirit, and his name is Marco. The bitter irony cuts deep. Did she name their child after the exact enforcer who handed her those cruel exile papers? Before he can process it, his phone vibrates. It is his security chief. Lorenzo tries to ignore the screen, but the frantic calls keep coming, followed by a text that shatters the night. The rival Ferraro family is moving in for the kill. He has to step right back into the bloodbath. We often believe we can just press reset on our lives, but unhealed trauma will always drag you kicking and screaming back into the dark. Look at the sheer terror crashing over Lorenzo's face. His blood runs cold. The Ferraro syndicate. The very ghosts who framed Clara 6 years ago have crawled back from the grave. When he answers the phone, Marco's voice trembles with panic. The old king's son has claimed the throne, and he is hungry to carve his name into the underworld. They intercepted a chilling broadcast. The new boss is plotting a massive execution, aiming straight for Lorenzo's unprotected heart. The Don spent years fighting imaginary battles, blind to the enemies waiting for his moment of weakness. You cannot simply walk away from a blood feud. The harsh reality is that peace never comes from running away. It only arrives when you finally turn around and face the demons you tried to bury. Watch the untouchable Don lose his nerve. Lorenzo demands intel, but Marco hesitates. In this dark world, dead air on the line means catastrophe. The rival family is hunting down every soul connected to Lorenzo's past. His reality fractures. His voice drops to a venomous whisper, ordering maximum security and a trace on every move the Ferraros make. Marco begs for his location, but Lorenzo kills the call. He stands paralyzed by the dirty motel window, tasting pure terror for the first time. This is the tragic trap of absolute power. The larger the empire you build, the heavier the stones when it falls. He is no longer a mafia god, just a terrified father. True strength is never found in intimidation. It is found when you risk everything to shield the ones you love. Picture the heavy dread of this morning. While the Ferraros hunt for ghosts, Clara sleepily shuffles to her door. Unaware her quiet sanctuary is about to shatter, she throws the deadbolt, and Lorenzo is standing on her porch. The untouchable king looks destroyed. His suit is ruined, and his frantic, paranoid eyes make Clara freeze. He begs to come inside, his deep voice physically cracking as he asks if their son is awake. He pushes past her, scanning the windows and calculating escape routes like a wounded animal. He arrived hoping to be their savior, but his very shadow just painted a massive target on their home. We see this painful reality too often. The people who try the hardest to play the hero are often the exact ones dragging you headfirst into the fire. The tension in this kitchen is thick enough to cut. Lorenzo scans the street for snipers like it is a normal morning. Clara swallows her panic, offering coffee just to anchor herself. He rejects it and orders her to sit. Instantly, Clara's armor goes up. She crosses her arms, reminding him sharply that she stopped taking his orders years ago. Lorenzo closes his eyes, the regret visibly crushing him. Stripped of his terrifying aura, he begs her to listen. He refuses to sit, burying his hands in his pockets because they will not stop shaking. Then he drops the heavy truth, the betrayal he accused her of. He was completely wrong. It takes reaching rock bottom for a king to finally swallow his pride. But sadly, a delayed confession means nothing when the trauma has already permanently scarred your soul. Clara offers nothing but ice, stating she already knew he was wrong, but Lorenzo unravels the real nightmare. The true traitor was Dante, bleeding their secrets directly to the Ferraros. Framing Clara was a masterful, evil stroke. Warmth drains from her face as the terrifying reality sets in. The hit was always meant for her. Lorenzo admits she was his true weakness, and casting her out destroyed his humanity. When she demands why he is digging up these graves now, his voice drops into the abyss. He confesses he slaughtered Dante 3 years ago. We have probably both made this mistake in our minds. We convince ourselves that revenge will cure our pain, but burying enemies never heals a broken heart. It merely leaves you alone in the dark with blood on your hands. Picture the devastation in that room. Lorenzo stares at Clara, his eyes hollowed out by a dread he cannot hide. He drops a truth that shatters her world. The Ferraro bloodline did not die. The new heir is hunting for blood, and Clara is the ultimate prize. The heir goes ice cold. She practically chokes on the one question that haunts her soul. Do they know about our son? Lorenzo cannot even speak the words. He just swallows hard, his tired eyes drifting down the hall to lock onto little Marco's door. The silence is suffocating. Clara breaks, screaming that he will not drag his mafia wars into her quiet life. It leaves us with a heavy truth. You can drive to the absolute edge of the earth, but your past choices always find a way to track you down. The oxygen simply vanishes from the room. Lorenzo drops his voice to a dark whisper. If the new boss finds little Marco, their innocent boy becomes a pawn in a brutal mafia war. Clara shakes with a furious, terrified rage. She points at the door, demanding he go back to Milan and play dead to protect their child. Lorenzo stands there like a monument of pure grief. He tells her the hunt is moving, and running makes them easy targets. She snaps back, throwing her 6 years of peaceful survival in his face. Lorenzo pulls his shaking hands from his pockets and delivers a cold reality. Hiding in the dark works perfectly, right until somebody flips on the lights. It is a bitter pill to swallow. Simply closing your eyes never makes the real monsters disappear. You and I have to look at this quiet shift in power. Clara finally breaks, collapsing as the nightmare she spent 6 years outrunning catch up. Her voice is barely a thread when she asks what he actually wants. Lorenzo drops to the floor, crouching below her eye level. This ruthless boss strips away his pride, begging to protect them. He promises to flood the village with his men, building an invisible fortress around her life. She demands to know his price. Lorenzo swears there is no catch. He refuses to use this terror to force his way into being a father. He only wants them to live. It teaches us something profound. True love is not always holding someone close. Sometimes it means building an iron wall to keep them safe. Even if you are forever stuck on the outside. Picture Lorenzo making this heavy vow. He swears that the second this thread is buried, he will vanish forever, but tonight, he refuses to leave them exposed. Clara stares him down, searching for his old manipulation. But all she sees is the same terrified panic she feels whenever she checks on their son. She reluctantly takes the deal, laying down the absolute harshest boundaries. His muscle must stay completely invisible, and little Marco can never know a thing. Most importantly, Lorenzo is strictly banned from playing dad. He just takes the hit, quietly accepting his bitter exile. It shows how utterly brutal life can get. The heaviest punishment on this earth is standing mere inches away from the person you love most. Permanently forbidden from reaching out to hold them. Notice how the background street noise completely drops out of this moment. The soft morning light hits Clara, but her eyes are pure, unforgiving steel. This is a mother pushed to the ragged edge of her sanity, dropping her voice to a harsh whisper. She swears to Lorenzo that if he operates behind her back, it is over. If he so much as breathes a hello toward that little boy without her permission, she will end him herself, and trust me, that threat is not just empty air. She means every single agonizing syllable. It brings up one of the most basic rules of survival we all eventually learn. You can mess with a lot of dangerous things in this crazy world, but you never ever test a mother who has her back shoved aggressively against a wall. Let the lens pan across what looks like the ultimate neighborhood dream, but Clara is a master at reading the quiet shadows. Otherwise, she would completely miss the mafia watchers lingering out of sight. There is a woman jogging way too slowly past the bakery, and a fisherman with a flawless view of Clara's porch. On the surface it looks like paradise, but underneath, Clara is suffocating. For 6 years, she tasted actual freedom, keeping her boy entirely off the mob radar. Now that heavy iron cage has slammed right back down over her life. The tragedy is that she has to step inside and lock the door herself just to survive. It leaves us with a major reality check. We always think freedom is just finding the right spot on a map. But true freedom only happens when you can finally stop checking your rearview mirror. The scene cuts into a cramped-in room that Lorenzo has flipped into a tense command center. The shadows cannot hide how exhausted he looks. His hard face lit only by the cold glare of monitors. He is glued to a secure phone line, taking in frantic updates from Milan. The youngest Ferraro boss is out there hunting, ripping through old archives to find a fatal weakness. Lorenzo clenches his tired jaw. He swore he burned every trace of Clara to ash years ago, but this bitter update delivers a chilling reality check, proving that human memory always outlives a deleted file. You can try to throw a lit match on your dark history, but the life lesson here is brutal. Secrets are exactly like water. No matter how tight you clench your fists, they always find the narrowest little crack to bleed right through. The camera shifts to Lorenzo at the window, sunlight catching the dust around his dark silhouette, down in those quiet streets. His own flesh and blood sits at a kitchen table, asking questions Clara cannot safely answer. This kid just wanted to know what his father's voice sounded like. That simple wish shatters this hardened mobster more completely than a bullet ever could. His son spent 5 agonizing years growing up without a father. Now the kid is barely 50 meters away. Yet Lorenzo is banned from offering even a basic hello. A mafia king commanding thousands of lives is entirely powerless over his own beating heart. It brings us to a harsh reminder tonight. All the power and endless wealth in the universe amount to absolute zero when you are permanently forbidden from holding the people you actually love. Stick with me, because you and I can practically feel these cold walls closing in. Lorenzo barks desperate commands at his crew, fighting to outrun the slaughter. On the phone, his guy begs him to show restraint. If the Ferraro family figures out why Lorenzo is hiding here, if their world ends in blood, the line dies. Lorenzo's posture hardens into pure steel. He is not waiting for the executioner. The scene cuts to Clara guiding her son to school, right as Lorenzo steps out of the morning mist. Then the true climax hits. Little Marco spots the massive mobster first, his eyes snapping wide with pure recognition. It shows us a brutally honest truth. You can build iron fortresses to hide your dark history, but fate always finds a twisted way to bring those massive walls crashing back down to the earth. Let the camera freeze on this exact frame. Study the agonizing distance suspended between these 3 souls. Look at the panicked angle of Clara's shoulders as her mama bear instinct screams to bolt. Then look at the subtle trembling in Lorenzo's jaw. This guy has violently dismantled criminal empires, yet he is completely paralyzed by a small boy in a school uniform. The pale morning light casts an unforgiving shadow across the pavement, literally splitting their worlds in half. It is a masterpiece of unsaid agony, suspended in silence. Moments like this offer a profound lesson. Sometimes we have to forcefully hit pause on our fast-moving lives to truly see the heavy damage we carry. The absolute hardest battles in this world are never fought with weapons, but with the haunting gravity of a deeply enduring love. The lens captures the quiet brutality of this standoff. Clara stands rigid, acting as a desperate shield blocking her son from his mafia father. She crouches low, her voice shaking, begging little Marco to walk the rest of the way to school alone. Lorenzo, this hardened enforcer, stands rooted to the pavement like lead. The kid glances between the adults, sensing the suffocating tension. He nods quietly, takes a few hesitant steps, and then stops. He turns back around just to study this towering stranger. It shows how life operates with such cruel irony. We exhaust our souls running away from our worst mistakes, only to find our dark history staring right back at us through the pure eyes of our own children. It leaves us with a painful truth. The scariest ghosts we desperately try to outrun are often the exact ones we breathed life into. Look at the insane tragedy unfolding right here. The little boy points at the mobster's inked hands, whispering that his drawings are nice. It is a heartbreaking moment of innocence, blind to the fact that those exact hands have violently ruined countless lives. The camera lingers on Lorenzo's fractured expression. This terrifying enforcer blinks, looking totally disarmed, and murmurs a hollow thank you. The second those school doors click shut, the tension shatters. Clara violently turns on him, her fury boiling over at this reckless visit. Lorenzo slices through her panic with a dead, empty tone. Time has officially run out. They retreat to a quiet cafe, hiding in the shadows. It reminds us of a hard truth we all face. The massive walls we spend years building to keep the monsters out often become the exact cages that trap us when real danger knocks. The air in the cafe is heavy, the kind of thick tension that comes right before a storm. Lorenzo stares at a coffee he will never touch, while Clara sits rigid across from him, begging for answers. Then he drops the anvil. Ferraro sent his thugs to squeeze Daniela, an old accountant from Lorenzo's dark history. Under the crushing weight of the mob, the poor woman broke, spilling every secret about Clara's escape into the night. Clara freezes, her blood turning to ice. You can change your name and run to the edge of the earth, but the shadows always follow. It teaches us a haunting truth about this world. No matter how deep you try to bury your past, a single forgotten whisper will always come back to burn your sanctuary entirely to the ground. Lorenzo holds his gaze dead entirely, a tragic masterclass in burying his soul beneath a frozen mask. He leans across the table, letting the shadows hide his face, and breathes out the ultimate nightmare. Daniela noticed Clara was carrying a child right before she vanished. He does not even need to finish the sentence. Clara crushes a shaking hand against her mouth, a stifled, agonizing sob tearing through her throat. The underworld knows about her little boy. She is paralyzed by the thought of them using her innocent son to chain the dawn. But Lorenzo delivers the final, crushing blow. The hit is officially out on both of them now. It leaves us with a painful reflection for the late hours. The very second you start loving someone more than your own breath, you hand this cruel world the perfect weapon to completely destroy you. Just listen to how sick this underground game has become. Ferraro is totally blinded by his own greed. Snatching young Marco would be his ultimate trophy, a twisted way to prove the untouchable Don can actually bleed. Lorenzo sits there, watching his dark reality pull Clara under. He tells her the bitter truth. Her quiet life in the shadows is over, and they need to run to his fortified compound. Today Clara breaks down, tears streaming as she begs to go back to her simple, peaceful days. But Lorenzo cuts through her panic with ice-cold logic. A quiet life means absolutely nothing if your child is in a coffin. It is a terrifying wake-up call for anyone listening tonight. Clinging to a comfortable illusion is the most dangerous choice you can make when a brutal reality is already busy kicking down your front door. Those cold words strike her right in the chest. 6 agonizing years of fighting for a sliver of peace, erased over a single cup of coffee. When she nervously whispers where they are supposed to go, the boss gives her one word: Milan, his impenetrable Mafia stronghold. Clara lets out a fractured, hollow laugh, suffocated by the heavy irony. He expects her to drag their innocent boy straight into the bleeding heart of his criminal empire. Lorenzo stares right through her, swearing his massive walls will keep their bloodline safe, but Clara knows the heavy truth. They are just trading a fragile freedom for a gilded cage until Ferraro is buried. It shows us how terribly life can deal its cards. Sometimes the only way to survive a deadly storm is to walk directly into its violent center, even if it ends up costing your soul. You and I can practically hear the iron bars slamming shut around her. Clara spent every waking moment running from this exact nightmare. And now the deadliest man she knows is her only shield. Her voice cracks, drawing the stares of strangers, as she begs him for just a little more time. She whispers how utterly insane it is for him to demand her trust after the absolute hell he put her through. The quiet agony in this moment will break your heart. Lorenzo just lowers his heavy gaze. He knows he has not earned a single ounce of her forgiveness, yet he asks for it anyway, because the alternative is a sniper bullet in the dark. It reveals a deeply tragic truth about our existence. The most agonizing choices in life are rarely between right and wrong, but between two brutal kinds of pain, simply hoping you find a way to survive. Picture the raw desperation at that table. Clara presses her hands fiercely against the wood, her knuckles drained of color as she tries to hide her trembling wrists. She is desperately trying to lay down ground rules for a ruthless underworld king, demanding he shield their little Marco from the carnage. She speaks of boundaries and returning to normal, as if she were merely signing a lease. But the terrible truth hangs in the air. You cannot just dip a single toe into a rushing river of blood. You either stay safely on the shore, or the dark current pulls you all the way under. Clara believes she is shielding her boy, yet she is handing him right back to the monster she fled. Watching her cling to this fragile illusion is heartbreaking. It reminds us that desperate denial is truly the most tragic flaw of the human heart. The focus shifts to Lorenzo, and you can catch a barely visible tremor in his jaw. It is the only fracture in his stone exterior. In a gravelly whisper, he asks what becomes of him and his son once the smoke clears. Clara has run from this exact ghost for years, she admits, voice trembling, that she has no idea if his presence will save their boy or destroy his soul. But then she makes a fatal misstep, her eyes soften, and she actually thanks him for coming to warn them. It is a heartbreaking mistake. She is confusing a calculated underworld maneuver for genuine empathy. This moment leaves a heavy warning hanging in the midnight air. Just because someone offers you a fleeting second of grace, it does not magically erase an entire lifetime spent orchestrating ruthless violence in the cold shadows. The air grows colder as Clara unknowingly tightens the noose around her own neck. She whispers her gratitude, praising the Mafia boss for asking, instead of stealing them away in the night. She looks into the eyes of her greatest ruin, completely convinced she is seeing a reformed man. Then she twists the knife deeper. She tells him their little boy actually longs for his father. Hearing that innocent yearning, Lorenzo loses his iron grip and his terrifying mask finally shatters to reveal a raw, bleeding heart. Clara takes a fragile breath, promising they will sort it out once they are safe. It is a suffocating irony. She believes they are running from the storm together, completely forgetting she is riding with the hurricane. It exposes a fatal weakness. Unchecked hope is truly the sweetest, yet deadliest poison we could ever choose to drink. 3 hours later, the steel trap finally snaps shut. They are tearing down the highway to Milan in Lorenzo's armored SUV, a rolling fortress cutting through the dark in the back. Little Marco presses his curious face against the heavily tinted glass, up front. Clara sits so rigidly, her spine might shatter. The heavy silence breaks when the boy innocently asks why their ride is so massively built. Lorenzo catches his son's eye in the rearview mirror, his deep voice softening as he explains that big cars protect the things that matter most. Listen to me, because this is where the tragedy sets in. This sweet child thinks he is on a grand family adventure, completely oblivious that he is locked inside a bulletproof cage. It leaves us with a bitter reality. Ignorance might feel exactly like peace, but it will never actually shield you from the wolves waiting outside. Children possess a terrifying instinct for the truth, and little Marco wastes no time carving to the bone. When his father speaks of protection, the boy drops an anchor of a question. He casually asks if his dad actually cares about his mother. The air inside that heavy vehicle instantly turns to lead. Clara stops breathing entirely, frozen in her seat. Lorenzo grips the wheel like a drowning man holding driftwood, choking out a desperate yes, but the boy is relentless, demanding to know why he abandoned them for years if his love was real. It is a brutal execution by innocence. Lorenzo absorbs the blow, confessing it was a tragic mistake that haunts his every waking moment. This raw exchange teaches us a beautiful, agonizing lesson. You can be the most feared king of the underworld, but the pure, honest question of your own child will still drop you straight to your trembling knees. Out of nowhere, this small boy delivers an agonizing piece of wisdom, casually remarking that saying sorry never fixes a broken toy, but it counts. Lorenzo swallows the heavy truth when Marco asks if he will keep trying. Lorenzo meets Clara's terrified gaze in the mirror and vows to try until his final breath. The tension breaks when the massive iron gates of the estate finally loom out of the dark. It is a shadowy villa carved directly into the mountain. Marco lights up with wonder, declaring they have arrived at a giant castle. Lorenzo offers a quiet correction, while Clara grips her door handle until her hands ache. She knows the dark blood that flows beneath those floors. It leaves us to ponder a twisted reality tonight. We love to romanticize the grand beauty of towering stone castles, entirely forgetting they were always built to ensure desperate prisoners could never manage to escape. The world slows to a painful crawl at the gates, our eyes locking onto Clara's trembling hands. Years ago, she was an invisible ghost in this city, completely beneath the notice of these ruthless men. Now she crosses the threshold in the Dawn's armored car, trapped in a terrifying purgatory. Is she stepping in as the queen of the syndicate, a high-value hostage, or the tragic mother of the next Mafia king? It highlights a chilling truth. The quiet streets we walk down in innocence can seamlessly transform into our darkest traps. Lorenzo exhales a heavy, exhausted breath, telling her to hold on before stepping out into the cold night. He shares a grim nod with his enforcer, then pulls the door open for his boy. Little Marco steps onto the gravel, his innocent wide eyes sweeping over a vast, blood-stained empire he never once asked to inherit. Picture a fortress of cold stone, swarming with armed men who have forgotten how to sleep. Right in the center of this suffocating tension stands a tiny boy named Marco, wandering the compound like it is a carnival. You and I know the stories about Lorenzo, a Don who rules with absolute terror, but tonight the monster vanishes. He drops to his knees on the concrete, gently introducing his son to a heavily scarred hitman. The boy looks up at this towering enforcer and cheers, because they share the same name. Right there, the mercenary's ruined face breaks into a soft, genuine smile. It is a beautiful, fragile truth to hold on to. No matter how thick the emotional armor we forge in the dark, the pure, untainted innocence of a child will always find the cracks and let the light in. Their first week inside this gilded cage is a heavy mix of velvet luxury and quiet, creeping dread. Clara and her boy are sealed away in a massive wing, looking out over gardens that feel more like a painted backdrop. Lorenzo spends his days fighting a ghost war in the streets, but when the sun drops, he is always at the dinner table. Young Marco absorbs this strange world effortlessly. To him, his father is just a quiet man with fascinating ink covering his arms. The boy reaches out, his small fingers tracing the dark sleeves, asking what the pictures mean. Lorenzo softly says the tattoos help him remember the things he never wants to lose. We all carry the heavy ghosts of our past. But some souls choose to carve their deepest regrets directly into their skin, just to ensure they never make the same mistake twice. Marco refuses to let the mystery fade, his innocent curiosity backing a ruthless crime boss into a corner. The air grows heavy as Lorenzo scrambles, desperately trying to spin his violent life into a harmless bedtime story. He tells his boy the ink is a promise to keep their family safe. Marco immediately points to Clara, proudly declaring that his mother keeps him safe even when her hands are shaking. Then, with those identical gray eyes, the child delivers an unintended dagger. He asks his father if he is actually good at hiding his fear. It is a suffocating moment, stripping away the Don's terrifying mask. You can project all the toughness in the world, but the unclouded gaze of a child will always pierce through the armor and recognize the silent panic hiding right behind your eyes. In the absolute silence of that room, the feared Mafia king quietly shatters. Lorenzo kneels, looking into his son's face, and confesses in a rough whisper that he is deeply afraid of failing the people he loves. Using the simple, flawless logic only a 5-year-old possesses, Marco suggests his parents should just team up to protect each other. Clara watches them, her heart fracturing in real time. But the underworld never allows happiness to linger. 3 nights later, a rival syndicate turns Clara's old apartment building into a mountain of burning ash, missing her by mere hours. The shockwaves of that blast carry a brutal reminder for all of us listening tonight. The razor-thin boundary between losing everything that matters and waking up to a second chance is entirely dictated by the blind, unpredictable mercy of time. Let us step into the suffocating darkness of that reality. The smoking crater back in the city proves their enemies are hunting for blood. While Marco sleeps peacefully, Lorenzo pulls Clara into a shadowed hallway to deliver a chilling truth. He admits that the rival family knows she and the boy are his only true vulnerability. The massive iron gates outside are no longer keeping the danger at bay. They are locking the prey inside. If she tries to run now, they will not survive. Clara struggles for breath, begging to know how long they must live in this beautiful tomb. Lorenzo's eyes turn to ice, stating they stay until he buries every last enemy. It is a cold, harsh awakening. We often believe we can simply outrun the shadows of our past. But eventually, the life we tried to abandon will always show up to collect its heavy debt. Clara struggles to breathe as the reality of his words wraps around her throat. She stares at the man she never stopped loving, seeing him casually orchestrate a massacre, like it is just another day at the office, this cold. Mechanical comfort with death is the exact nightmare she fled 6 years ago. Her voice is barely a whisper as she asks if drowning their rivals in blood will actually end the suffering. Lorenzo looks away into the dark. He is a man who has drowned in vendettas his entire life, and he knows the bitter truth. There is always another monster waiting in the wings. You and I both know the tragic cycle of revenge. Striking back is never a simple faucet you can turn off once the damage is done. Trying to heal your own shattered heart by breaking someone else will only lock you inside that dark nightmare forever. The tension peaks as Lorenzo steps closer, his voice vibrating with raw desperation. He swears on his soul that he will gladly take every single bullet meant for them. For the first time, he calls them his family. That word hangs in the quiet air, heavy and loaded, years ago. Clara vanished into the night with his unborn son, because she believed Lorenzo was destined to become the ruthless monster his father was now. He offers her the fierce devotion she always craved, but it comes wrapped in the scent of gunpowder. It is a profoundly tragic offering. He cannot give her peace, only his body as a shield, yet there is a quiet beauty hidden in the wreckage. True love is rarely a polished, perfect thing. Real loyalty is built by deeply flawed people who willingly bleed just to become a better shelter. Clara breaks down under the heavy weight of it all. Tears spill over as she confesses her absolute terror, admitting she has no idea how to love a man whose entire existence is anchored in violence. But Lorenzo does not crowd her. He stays just close enough to be a presence, respecting the invisible boundary she drew years ago. He gently asks for the chance to rebuild the trust he burned to the ground. Clara is paralyzed by the fear that letting him back in means accepting a life sentence in this golden cage slowly. He raises his heavily tattooed hand, holding it in the air, giving her the space to run. When she stays, his thumb softly brushes away her tear. It is a powerful reminder. Trust is not a magical fix. It is a fragile bridge you must construct over a terrifying drop. one agonizing step at a time. Every trace of the feared syndicate boss melts away into the shadows. Lorenzo drops his voice to a raw, painful whisper, making a devastating confession. He tells her that if he were truly the monster his father was, he would simply lock the doors and use their son as a chain to bind her here forever. That is exactly how the old regime operated. But looking into her eyes, he promises that if walking away is what she truly needs to feel safe, he will stand by and let her go. He lays his darkest demons bare on the floor. Clara loses the internal battle, her emotional walls finally collapsing as she leans her face into his scarred palm. This moment holds an incredible lesson about devotion. The ultimate display of true love is possessing the absolute power to trap someone, but choosing to leave the door wide open instead. 2 agonizing weeks pass, and the quiet war finally detonates, but Ferraro, the rival boss, does not send a team of assassins instead. He strikes a far more devastating blow. He leaks the existence of Lorenzo's secret family to the entire criminal underground in a matter of hours. Lorenzo transforms from an untouchable king to a desperate man with a glaring weakness across the city. Ambitious thugs begin whispering in smoky back rooms, plotting to rip the crown away while the Don is busy playing father. Let us pause here, because this nightmare forces us to face a very cold reality. The deadliest weapon anyone can wield against you is rarely a physical threat or a lack of resources. The instrument that will truly bring you to your knees is almost always the one beautiful secret you tried so desperately to bury. When the sun is up, Lorenzo projects the image of an unbreakable Mafia god, but at 3 a.m, the illusion shatters. Clara finds him alone in his dark office, surrounded by the feeling that his entire empire is crumbling into ash. She begs him to fabricate a story, to hide their little boy from the crossfire. But Lorenzo knows the unforgiving nature of the streets. The wolves have caught the scent, so he makes a terrifying high-stakes gamble. He decides to walk his son directly into the light, officially presenting young Marco to the underworld as the undisputed heir, daring anyone to make a move. It is a chilling strategy, but it carries a profound truth about survival. When the darkness comes hunting for you, hiding only makes you prey sometimes. You must step directly into the fire and own your truth. You and I can feel the sheer suffocating panic radiating from Clara. In this moment, she stares at the father of her child, paralyzed by the fact that he is willingly painting a target on the back of their young boy. But Lorenzo does not soften the blow. His voice is a low, heavy rumble as he tells her the snipers are already in position. The only choice left is whether their son hides in the shadows crying, or stands tall in the light wearing armor. He grips her shoulders, and in that agonizing second, any fading dream of a normal, quiet life turns to dust. They are tethered to this violent storm together. It is a harsh reflection on the paths we walk. Once the damage is done, you cannot rewind the clock. You simply have to pull your loved ones close. Stand your ground and brace for the inevitable impact. Picture this scene with me. We close in on Lorenzo's weathered face, the deep lines of a man who is completely out of moves. His toxic control just evaporates into the cold night. He makes one final tragic plea, begging Clara to stand by his side while he burns the city down to keep their little boy breathing. He swears that once the smoke clears, she can walk away forever. But Clara just stares at the man who broke her world. Then she asks the one question that shatters him: what about the boy, who still thinks this is just a fun holiday? Lorenzo's eyes go completely dead. It is time to spill the ugly truth. We all learn this the hard way. You can only shield the people you love from the dark for so long before you have to stand up and face the crushing weight of reality together. This is the split second the merciless king of the underworld shatters into jagged pieces. You can actually see his broad shoulders cave in under the weight of his own sins. His voice shakes, violently tearing away decades of thick Mafia armor. He confesses to Clara that he has finished running. He is done wearing cruelty like a badge, done echoing the toxic ghost of his father. Clara does not fight him. She does not scream or throw his brutal past back in his face. She just lets silent tears fall, offering a whispered surrender. The irony here is so heavy. It took a 5-year-old kid to break the monster that rival families could not even scratch. It is a wild reminder for all of us. Genuine love is the only force strong enough to tear down the heavy walls we build to protect ourselves. The sun casts long shadows as we hit the breaking point. Little Marco sinks deep into the giant leather sofa, pressed hard against his trembling mother. His sharp gray eyes dart between these 2 shattered adults as they try to wash away their bloody history. They tell him mistakes were made, but that this dangerous man truly loves him. Marco absorbs the truth with a chilling gravity. You can almost hear the terrified drumming of Clara's heart. She is watching her innocent boy swallow a mountain of violent trauma. The room goes dead silent. The music fades to absolutely nothing as the child slowly turns to face the ruthless king of the underworld. It goes to show you something real. The quietest moments in our lives often force us to carry the absolute heaviest burdens of all. This boy interrogates the crime boss with a cold precision that cops could only dream of. Marco looks him dead in the eye and asks if he loved his mom, if he still does, and if he loved him before he was even born. Lorenzo's iron voice violently cracks. He confesses that a bleeding hole in his soul finally sealed shut the exact moment he first saw his son. Then comes the emotional drop. The kid slides off the sofa, marches right up to this towering instrument of death, and fully accepts him. But he lays down one unbreakable condition. Lorenzo must never make his mom cry again. It is a breathtaking strike that leaves you speechless. It teaches us a beautiful lesson about true power. The most rigid boundaries are always drawn by the innocent, who somehow hold unimaginable sway over the damned. You and I have to appreciate the heavy gravity of this sequence together. Lorenzo, a phantom who barely blinks staring down a loaded barrel, stands completely paralyzed with tears flooding his eyes. He chokes out a sacred vow to his boy in response. Marco extends his tiny hand, sealing a pact like a massive street treaty. Clara watches their mirrored gray eyes lock in a delicate truce. Cut to 3 days later, and the room turns ice cold. Lorenzo stands before the criminal elite, proudly presenting his hidden heir. It is a flawlessly calculated chess move. He frames his family as a masterstroke of protection, spinning his fatal vulnerability into a terrifying display of power. It really proves a solid point. We can always consciously transform our deepest weaknesses into our absolute greatest armor. Lorenzo stares down the criminal underworld, promising to rain absolute hellfire upon anyone who dares cast a shadow over his boy. The foolish rivals mistake this raw declaration for weakness, but the cunning ones shiver, realizing that a mob father defending his bloodline is a force of apocalyptic nature. Yet Alessandro Ferraro arrogantly ignores the warning. The scene then hard cuts to a vibrant, sun-drenched Tuesday. Clara is finally exhaling, watching Marco happily chase bugs in the garden. It is an absolute masterclass in building tension. We learn a haunting lesson about the rhythm of life in this peaceful moment. The most terrifying tragedies almost always arrive wrapped in perfect, golden peace. Right before the universe violently rips the ground out from beneath your feet. Without warning, deafening gunfire violently shreds the golden afternoon. The camera shakes with pure chaos. Guards scream as heavy rounds pulverize the estate windows, plunging the scene into a mother's absolute worst nightmare. Clara does not hesitate for a single second. She snatches Marco and sprints toward the reinforced steel bunker Lorenzo built for this exact apocalypse. She hurls the heavy vault doors shut, sealing them in pitch blackness, and crushes her trembling kid to her chest. She whispers hollow promises of safety she cannot even believe, just praying the iron holds. It reveals a terrifying truth about human endurance. Time completely stops when you are trapped in the suffocating dark, desperately waiting to see if everything you love will survive the next fragile breath. The heavy steel door shrieks on its hinges, revealing Lorenzo bathed in flickering light. He stands there like the Grim Reaper, his white shirt soaked black with blood. His face is a frozen mask of violence. But the second his eyes find Clara and Marco shivering in the shadows, that monstrous aura dissolves. He breathes out a shaky sigh, telling them Ferraro is dead. Clara loses all her strength, collapsing into uncontrollable sobs. Lorenzo falls to his knees. He wraps his massive, trembling arms around his family, desperate to shield them from the horror, right in the center of this trauma. Little Marco peers up and innocently asks if his father is okay. It shows us that even in our absolute darkest moments, genuine family is the only anchor that truly matters. You and I both know it is wild how kids process dark moments. Lorenzo stares down at his son, swearing on his life that no one will ever hurt them again. Marco just blinks his wide eyes, nods, and innocently asks if they can go back to looking at bugs in the dirt tomorrow. It is such a pure question that Lorenzo actually laughs. It is not his usual cold smirk, but a real rusty sound tearing straight from his chest. He promises his boy they will hunt for bugs every day. The camera sweeps us into a fast montage. For months, Lorenzo violently stabilizes his empire, yet behind the closed doors of his home, his soul has visibly shifted. It reminds us that deep, lasting healing begins not with massive gestures but with the simplest joys of life, like playing in the dirt. This is exactly where the story earns its heavy emotional weight. Lorenzo ceases to be the untouchable ghost of the underworld. Instead, the terrifying boss sits quietly under the glow of the dining room chandelier every night. He watches the light catch Clara's face, quietly learning exactly how she takes her coffee. They do not magically fall back into bed together, because both carry far too many bleeding scars for a cheap resolution. It is an agonizingly slow, beautiful burn. We see late-night whispers by the kitchen sink, fingers brushing by pure accident, and desperate glances shared while their son happily babbles nearby. It proves a beautiful point. True redemption is never a quick fix. It is always built patiently through quiet, daily, consistent effort over time. We have all seen countless stories of trauma, but this frame completely shatters the mold. Clara quietly finds Lorenzo alone in his shadow-soaked study, staring blindly at a faded photograph of his dead father. The heavy silence breaks when Lorenzo confesses how that cruel man drilled it into his bones that caring for anyone was a fatal flaw. But standing in the quiet dark, Lorenzo realizes his father was never strong. He was just a pathetic coward, terrified of real love. Clara steps into the dim light and firmly tells him he is absolutely nothing like his old man. Lorenzo admits that she and Marco rescued him from that empty hell. We learn a powerful truth right here. Real strength is never about closing your heart to a cold world, but having the raw courage to finally let love back in. Watch how the camera frames Clara in this pivotal moment. She steps right into his space, close enough to see the deep lines of regret carved into his face. She refuses to offer him a fake fairy tale pardon. She looks into his eyes and states clearly that his past actions broke her, and total forgiveness might actually be impossible. But she is willing to try building something entirely new from the ashes. Her fingers slowly trace the faded serpent tattoo curving along his neck, asking if he is truly ready. Lorenzo grips her hand tightly, pledging the rest of his natural life to her. This breathless vow leaves you and me with a hard-earned life lesson. Forgiveness is not about magically erasing the painful past. It is about choosing to build a brand new future from the broken pieces left behind. Think about the bitter poetry of this exact moment. They are standing right back in that very same garden. The altar is pitched over the dirt where young Marco used to dig for beetles, the exact ground where they once dodged raining lead. Marco walks the rings down the aisle and right on his heels. That broken old security chief actually lets out a jagged smile. Clara moves forward in white, but she is no innocent maiden. She walks like a survivor pulling air into her lungs. Lorenzo just waits under that punishing sun, his sleeves rolled high, heavy gang ink laid bare. He is completely done pretending to be a gentleman. And honestly, there is a beautiful lesson here. You never have to cover up your ugliest scars to earn a real chance at starting over. Let us look at this together, shall we? This is the bitterest pill to swallow. Make absolutely no mistake, Lorenzo is a terrifying man. He built his empire by breaking bones and leaving zero apologies yet. The wild truth is that he loves this woman with a gravity that could shatter the earth. When Clara takes his ruined hands, she stares straight into those cold eyes. In that quiet heartbeat, she does not see a boss. She sees the broken boy she fell for a lifetime ago. Her heavy walls crumble into dust. Her lips part, and she finally breathes the words she locked away for years. I love you. It leaves us with a haunting truth. Finding real love often means dropping our tallest defenses, just to see the fragile soul hiding behind a lifetime of terrible sins. That simple sentence is the exact moment the unbreakable king of the streets shatters into pieces, this ruthless crime boss. A man who built an empire by never showing a drop of fear, just stands there frozen. Hot tears spill down his rough cheeks under the glaring sun. He pulls her tight against his chest, whispering that she was always his only light. It feels like the perfect movie ending. But you and I both know their future is an absolute minefield. There will be rival gangs, more gunfire, and bitter matches over raising a kid inside a Mafia shadow. Still, as they hold each other, the core truth stays steady. A happy ending is never about finding a life without trouble. It is just about finding the exact right person to hold your hand when the fires inevitably burn through. 10 heavy years vanish in a single heartbeat. We find Marco at 15, and that innocent boy playing in the dirt is long gone. He sits deep in the shadows, asking terribly dangerous questions. He wants to know the brutal weight of his last name, and the real meaning behind the faded ink on his father's arms. Lorenzo sits across from his son in the exact same suffocating study where he once fought his own father's ghost. The cycle of violence just keeps turning. Marco has his mother's features, but his eyes hold Lorenzo's cold stare. The boss finally breaks and admits his empire is built entirely on blood and bone. It serves as a stark reminder of a simple fact. We can never truly outrun our past choices, because the harsh reality of who we really are will always hunt us down. Lorenzo tells his boy straight. This is the violent underworld he was born into. Marco does not even flinch. He leans into the dim lamplight and calmly says he has known the truth for years. Clara's desperate illusion of keeping her baby pure shatters to dust. The poison was in the oxygen all along. Lorenzo stares across that heavy oak desk and realizes he is looking into a perfect mirror. Same dark blood, same chilling calm. Then Marco tilts his head and drops a question that puts a bullet straight through the old man's heart. He asks if his father regrets any of it. The suffocating silence reveals a harsh reality. The absolute hardest mirror to look into is the one reflecting our own deepest sins, staring right back at us through the eyes of our own children. Memories bleed through Lorenzo's mind like dark ink, his and son's tiny fingers wrapped around his thumb, Clara sobbing in her dress. The quiet life he almost drowned in gang blood. Lorenzo looks at his teenage boy and delivers the most twisted excuse a father could ever say. He whispers that he only regrets the times he failed them, but he will never regret the violent road that brought them together. It is an act of pure selfishness, dressed up to look like romance. Marco stays terrifyingly calm. He just nods. Then he casually asks what happens to the family empire when his father is gone. The kid is literally asking for the keys to hell. This heavy beat proves a sad truth. Selfishness disguised as love will always demand a devastating toll from the exact people we claim to protect. Stick with me here, because we need to see the absolute horror unfolding in this room. Lorenzo tells his boy the choice is his alone. He swears to protect him if he wants to walk away, but watch how the steel trap springs shut. Lorenzo leans forward and offers the ultimate bait. He promises to teach Marco how to rule the underworld with wisdom, to protect the family name without losing his soul. It is a breathtaking, fatal lie. You cannot rule a kingdom of corpses and keep your humanity. Lorenzo gently places his ruined, scarred hand over his son's smooth fingers. Marco just stares down at the terrifying legacy waiting to swallow him whole. It leaves us with a life lesson. You can never truly save someone from a toxic world, while actively inviting them to sit on its darkest throne. Marco stares at his father's shattered knuckles. When he speaks, his voice is dangerously steady. He says he wants to learn the family business. You and I both know the devastating reality here. The second that boy steps into the shadows, his fate is locked in blood, yet. Lorenzo's chest swells with a foolish, tragic pride. He whispers that they start tomorrow. And the wheel of generational trauma clicks right back into gear. The scene fades to the moonlit garden. Clara sits totally alone on the exact stone bench where they got married, staring up at the freezing stars. She became the enabler, and now she has lost everything. Her quiet grief is pure proof of one thing. Turning a blind eye to the ugly truth only guarantees that history will violently repeat itself. Out in the dark shadows of the patio, Lorenzo sits down hard. The weight of his sins pulls at his shoulders as he drops the news. He tells his wife their boy wants to learn the trade. Clara barely blinks. She looks out at the night and replies that she already knows. She does not scream or pack a bag. She simply surrenders to the gravity of the life they built. Lorenzo admits his bitter doubt, wishing a clean path existed for his son. But Clara defends the shadows, insisting Marco is making his own choice. She rests her tired head against his chest and whispers that right now is all they have. It is a quiet, stunning defeat. The real tragedy is how easily we adapt to the dark. They just sit watching the stars, while inside that cold house, their son drifts into dreams soaked in blood. The camera tries hard to wrap this nightmare in a warm golden glow. We are supposed to believe Marco will be protected by a father who learned love is not a weakness, and a mother who remembered how to trust. Lorenzo leans in whispering his devotion. Clara smiles through her deep exhaustion, whispering it right back. They sit among the garden blooms, pretending their violent ghosts are buried in the dirt. But let us look at the devastating reality together, one last time. They never conquered the darkness of the underworld. They just opened the front door and set a permanent place for it at their dinner table. They survived the storm, sure, but surviving always demands a terrible toll. They won the bloody war to save their marriage, but they sacrificed their own son's soul to pay the tab.
Lorenzo's regret is real, but the story makes it clear that regret alone is not enough. For 6 years he suffers after discovering Clara was innocent. He searches for her, thinks of her, and carries guilt. But guilt does not undo what happened. Clara still raised Marco alone. Marco still grew up without his father. The lost years cannot be returned. This is one of the strongest lessons of the story. Redemption must be proven through action. When Lorenzo finds Clara and Marco, he cannot demand immediate forgiveness. He cannot claim fatherhood as a right without earning it through patience and consistency. Clara is right to be cautious. She has survived the consequences of his mistake. She knows that love can be real and still cause harm if it is controlled by fear. Lorenzo begins to earn redemption when he listens. He respects Clara's boundaries. He warns her of danger instead of using danger to manipulate her. He protects Marco without forcing himself into the role of father too quickly. Later, he tells the truth to his son and accepts responsibility for the past. The story also shows that redemption is not about becoming perfect. Lorenzo still lives in a dangerous world. He still has blood on his hands. But he becomes different because he no longer hides behind the lessons of his cruel father. He chooses love, family, and emotional honesty over cold power. For viewers, the educational message is clear. Saying "I am sorry" is only the beginning. Real apology means changing the behavior that caused the pain. It means accepting consequences, giving the hurt person time, and becoming someone safer than you were before. Lorenzo's greatest redemption is not winning Clara back. It is becoming a man worthy of standing beside her and a father worthy of Marco's trust.